for a long, long time. It's actually embarrassing how long I've been around. So currently I am a solution architect, quote unquote manager within NTT Federal Services. NTT Federal Services is actually a proxy corporation to NTT Data. And our organization operates as a FOCI mitigated company separate from NTT Data, and so that we could actually do secure work. The cool thing for me about NTT Data Federal Services right now is my management actually asked me to start this innovation lab where they have invested in trying to learn how all of these complex pieces of technology fit together. In our journey, and we've talked to a lot of customers about this, and they all use the word journey. Started with ABAC, attribute-based access control. Then from there, we went to federated identity management, API gateway management, single sign-on, and then identity provisioning and governance, and so on and so forth. So I thought, I think Radiant Logic actually gave us this picture, but we modified it since then, right? So in the space that we are trying to occupy, all of the names on in the list on your screen, from Savient, CyberArk, Axiomatic, Axway, Savient, Splunk, SailPoint, all this stuff. These are all product companies, right? And they all have lots of products, and they all have lots of literature. And it's actually really, really hard to get a handle on how all the pieces fit together. At least for me, anyway. When I read about their stuff, it seemed like everybody says that you buy their stuff, it is the answer, as opposed to how does that fit within the context of everybody else, right? So what we did was sort of taken an approach of being from Missouri, the show me strategy, right? So what we try to do is take the pieces that have been offered by the vendor and actually put it into our lab and built real software around that. Not necessarily all the way out, right? But built real software around that so that we can see how all these pieces fit together, and that we could demonstrate it to you because it's not attributable to any customers directly, right? So the demo that we're going to do for you, we're not going to do all the pieces of the demo, but the demo that we're going to show you today, everything runs in the Azure, Microsoft Azure GovCloud, because that we have an arrangement with them or something. But that's what all of the stuff that we show you here is running on Azure GovCloud. Our technical team or IT team has extended the perimeter defense to this picture, so you actually cannot hit the portal that we have here, even though it's just a demo application, if you are not whitelisted, right? So our IT team has experience with setting up the perimeter defense, extending to the Azure cloud, and we are actually, my boss and I just talked about potentially taking this and adding Microsoft Office 365 to this thing, and trying to make it a real simulated corporation, and so that we can talk to you more about all the other pieces on the puzzle, right? So just walking through this diagram now, we have a simulated HR application. So this is actually a COTS product that we found on the web, open source. We brought it down to create the employee thing, right? So as Raghu said, we're actually using Active Directory as well as Azure AD, not just Active Directory by itself, right? So as you see that we're trying to create variations on the environment so that it's more heterogeneous and more realistic, as opposed to you know, we know one thing works, so we're just going to stick with that. So the identities come out of the database, goes into the Active Directory, and then we have Radiant Logics Federated ID system sitting in front of that. And it is Radiant Logic that is synchronized with Okta, not the Active Directories themselves, right? So I'm not a sales rep. We don't resell any products that we've built around, but we use the federated ID idea because it makes life easier in other aspects of this prototype we're talking about. Right, so again, I didn't do the synchronization, but I've seen the synchronization between Radiant Logic and Okta work, and the person that knows more about that is actually not on the call with us today, okay? So that is the identity portion, and we use Okta for single sign-on, and we built 2 different portals. The first one was the Spring Boot version, and then we wanted to build to test these REST APIs with AngularJS as the front end. So we built one of those, and both of these portal applications have single sign-on connections to Okta. I think I'm only going to be showing you the Spring Boot version today. And then underneath, we built Java versions of these REST APIs. These APIs are actually called PEPs, Policy Enforcement Points, because we are actually using Axiomatics ABAC product here on the board. So this is a new term, PEP, Policy Enforcement Point. So these APIs actually talk to the Axiomatic Policy Decision Point, PDP, where we have written externalized ABAC policies there. And we talk to, in this example, we only use SQL Server, but in other applications that we've built, we've used Postgres, DB2, and Oracle. It would all work the same way. So the other thing that's not drawn on this picture is that all the key attributes that's used by the ABAC policy engine coming out of the database also goes into Radiant Logic. It does not go, we don't have a direct connection from the ABAC policies to the databases. Okay, and we're working with a major financial house right now based on this architecture, and they use .NET. So what we did was we ported one of our, the mortgage loan API from Java to .NET, Microsoft .NET Core, and to basically do the same thing, talking to the Axiomatic ABAC policy. So right now, do you, Raghu and Brent, do you have any questions about the architecture? No? Okay, so are you guys familiar at all with ABAC?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm a big proponent of it, and we've actually been at this thing, the ABAC thing, for 5-6 years now, and Michael actually used to work for Axiomatics. So Raghu, if you don't understand what the ABAC is we externalize the access control policies from the programs, these API programs, and put them into the Axiomatic policy decision point in these policies. And the power of that is, we don't really illustrate that here, but in this presentation, but the power of that is when you have a enterprise-wide policy change, let's say something associated with the PII or GDPR, you could actually just make it in one place, as opposed to having to change the business logic in every one of the applications that you have on the board. Okay, so does that agree with what your understanding is, Brent?
Yeah, that's a great description. And I just posted into the chat a NIST document that we really like at Trivir that gives guidance about the disciplined areas of ABAC and where it is evolving and how we can best leverage it. It is a great way to get really fine-grained governance around resources and privileges and functions in a way that the business can set rules and constructs to protect those resources appropriately at various levels, but most importantly, get control of those resources into the hands of the business. It's really exciting when that's merged with governance and the rest of the ICAM stuff.
Right, and so you really appreciate this picture here then, because as again, we're not showing that today, but when we demonstrate this application more on the ABAC focus, unfortunately I can do a portion of it, but not the policy authoring change portion of it. Michael would have to share that. But the cool thing that we have in this demo is that we could actually go into this HR database, a COTS application, change some attribute about the user, like terminating an employee in the HR database. And as soon as we terminate them, they can't, even though they may still have been provisioned access rights to the portal, the data that's available to them has been eliminated because the ABAC policy checks for that status on the employee, right? And then again, in the demo, the other demo, where we change the policy, redeploy the policy, and all the applications behave correctly for the based on the new policy. So that thanks for sending that through, Brent. Really appreciate it. So let me do a quick demonstration of the system. It's only to show you that that all the pieces actually work together and that they exist, and we can go into more details if you wanted to do that. Okay, so this is the HR application. I'm just going to log in here just to show you. So these are the employees that we have in the system. So this is in the lower left right-hand corner of the previous diagram. Right, so these are the employees that are in the HR system. This is the system of record, if you will, and then the data in here is propagated over to Active Directory and Azure AD, and then up to Radiant Logic and up to Okta. So let me sign out here to make sure, right? So this is Okta's single sign-on page. And I guess for them, NTT Data is actually a big partner with Okta and a big user of Okta. Our small corporation, you know, sort of rides the pigtails of that, or coattails of that. And we actually had some problems, and our big corporation, Big Brother corporation, made a call, and we got some really good help right away. So. So good kudos for Okta. So this is our single sign-on. For demos, you know, I use Firefox for this because it saved all of my identities here. So the highest level, the CEO, the policy for CEO is that they could see everything, right? So this is this is the Spring Boot version. We search for a customer. And what you see is 3 different types of accounts: retail mortgage, retail vehicle loans, and corporate banking. And things that you should see is that we can see the account identity primary key, if you will, all of the attribute, all of the numbers associated with that, or the alphanumeric characters associated with those IDs. We can see the transaction details. We could edit the transaction detail because the policy says that I can, right? And then I could also update the editable fields within the account itself. And again, I can see all 3, right? So we have a policy that says if you are a business unit director of retail, this guy is auto, searching for the same customer, I will not be able to see the corporate banking account, right? So it's the same application. None of that logic actually exists here in the UI. It actually exists in the ABAC policies, right? And I can still see the account IDs, and I can still update. Oh, and also, here we have 12 months worth of historical data, right? That the business unit director can see, the CEO can see that also. So if I sign out here, go back in as the business unit director for corporate banking, you'll see that he could only see, or she could only see, the corporate banking account information and update that. So if we go in as a CSR for auto, search for that customer, this customer service rep could see both types of accounts for retail, mortgage and vehicle loan, but you'll see that the identifier here has been masked. The nice thing about this is that the identifier masking is actually happening at the API level. It's not stored in the database. As you saw, it's in clear text in the database, but the API returns the data in masked format here. Also, you see the update button is no longer available. And when I click in to view the transaction detail, I only see 3 months of transaction detail. So that is, and I don't have the update button available here. So that is all driven by the ABAC policy, and the identity and the governance of what I could see and so forth is actually based on the organizational structure defined in the database, not hard-coded in the business application. Okay, so that is basically a demo of this structure here, right? Again, I came in through the bank portal, and these APIs provided the data back to the bank portal, but the data that it retrieves back is based on the externalized business policy here, and that policy also checks for whether the employee is still active or not in the HR database, what organization they belong to, and then works out what they could actually see within each one of the APIs, and that's what the bank portal provides back. Okay, so that's what we have built, and again, this is all in Azure GovCloud with Okta integration. So I think at this point, I'd like to just open up for discussion and see what you guys have to say, or what do you think, what questions you may have, or so forth. Brent, Raghu?
Not from me currently.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about your experience with ABAC? Because you seem, I mean, you seem pretty knowledgeable and seem like you've actually done some implementations with it.
We have. We work quite a bit with the federal government. That's most of our revenue. And then second to that, we work a lot with the defense contractor community. One of the largest defense contractors in the world is one that we work with in multiple countries. And they had a problem with, I would say it's related to identity and access management, but they call it Export Control Authorization Services, or ECAS. This is the idea that resources and assets that talk about weapon systems or capabilities, those should be meta tagged with certain licenses so that we can control who has access to those and when. And when you look in the area of sanctions and governmental controls that would prevent a country or someone affiliated with a country from seeing those types of licensed intellectual properties, we need really great identity and access management solutions to guarantee that we will never give too much. Right. And there's also a business element to that, where you don't want to wait 9 months once somebody is authorized to receive a weapon system. You don't want a procurement process to take, up to a year or more. You want that to happen much, much quicker and reduce friction. So using identity and access management, much like what you've described here, we've built attribute-based access controls for the protection of intellectual properties within export control, so that the right people are able to access information at the right time, and we're doing it at blistering speed in less than 5 milliseconds. So that allows us to pull an attachment out of an email if the recipient is not licensed to see the data elements that are meta tagged in that PDF. It allows us to expedite procurement, but most importantly, from a governance perspective, we can prove to the US Department of State that our contractor is compliant.
That's awesome. So what you're saying is that you come up with a meta tagging methodology so that all PDF documents in this space or Word documents or so forth are religiously tagged with these tags, so that then you could interrogate those tags when those documents are being moved around, and using ABAC policies to decide whether those documents should be allowed to be moved or not based on the recipient of the email or the sender of the email and so forth.
You're right. Yeah, that's one use case. There's a governance and internal audit, external audit use cases. There are procurement use cases, but we effectively really need to make sure that the right people have access to the right information at the right times, and that all those people that are not licensed for that controlled IP, that they stay out and don't receive those things. Because for a defense contractor operating, in multiple billions a year, they can look at 4% of their yearly revenue fines if they breach export control in terms of Department of State regulations. So it's an expensive problem. And then on top of that, there are GDPR issues and other local privacy issues. So identity and access management really facilitates the mission.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Can you share with us which product you actually use for that, or is that something you built yourself?
That was my next question, Paul.
Sorry, guys. There's a little bit of a dog noise in the background. I'm not authorized to speak in detail of this particular implementation for this particular contractor. They consider it a unique differentiator in the marketplace. But I, as a consultant working in identity since 2000, I very much do believe that we can fail an identity and access management product or project with any product. But by applying best practices, working together with a knowledgeable team like we have here on the phone, we can succeed with any of the viable products. We work with most of the identity and access management capabilities that you would see in a Gartner leadership quadrant.
I like how you worded that, Paul.
I saw one project, one federal project that we were, it was procurement RFP that we were looking at, and the incumbent, instead of using a product, they actually ended up trying to build their own ABAC policy engine, and they spent more time doing that than actually solving the problem. Yeah, most of the products today, I think, are very, very powerful, and if used correctly, could solve a lot of problems. But did you guys find a lot of resistance with the current, sort of the I call it inline role-based application developers versus this new approach to doing things? Did you find when you started doing this thing that there was a lot of resistance by the quote unquote legacy engineers versus once you got it to work that people are like, oh yeah, this is awesome?
In this case, no, because they had been doing roles-based access management over a number of years, and they were kind of tired of dealing with the lifecycle management of the roles. There were more roles than users, and they had to constantly audit against them, ensure compliance with separation of duties and such. It was kind of a program in and of itself. And so they still have an element of that, but it's much, much simpler. Once we were able to sell the vision of, hey, you're going to avoid these fines that you've just received from Department of State, and you're going to have less to manage in terms of roles, it did help. We kind of moved the problem a little bit, but we moved it to people that are closer to it and can deal with it better.
Right. So what you're saying is they saw role explosion and managing, they couldn't get fine-grained enough to create enough roles to deal with all the problems. And once you create enough roles, managing assignment of those roles to the correct people is a huge problem, right? Whereas as you said, with externalized ABAC policy down to the attribute, you look at these meta tags and so forth, and the information, the attributes about the subject, either receiving the information or sending the information, you could actually get down without having too many roles, we call it role is just an attribute that leads in, one of the attributes that in the ABAC decision policy, but it's not the only one, right? Actually, I didn't notice because Zoom didn't show me, Deeparaj, you see that there's actually a whole bunch of people beyond Raghu and
right. Oh yeah, and sorry, I didn't want to interject. You seem to really be going there, but yeah, it looks like there's a roster of other attendees who have joined. So I'm not sure if you want to take a moment to have them.
Yeah, why don't we take a moment? Randy, Mahash, and Sawati, and Curtis, you guys want to just quickly introduce yourself and how we could have the conversation directed in an area that could help you more?
I'm Randy Randall. I'm IT for FedEx and doing a lot of cloud certifications and cloud cyber. So I'm looking at the diagram as a hacker of how I can attack it. So.
Yeah, I think first thing, from that perspective, the perimeter defense here on Azure Gov Cloud, we set up on the server that runs the banking portal. You actually only could, if you're on the whitelist, you can get in. Everything else is, you're not allowed to get in. Everything sits behind that firewall. So that's the nice thing about, the simple thing about the way that we protected this. But I think what we like to do moving forward is add Office 365 to this picture, add SharePoint and other, and then also other security products into this picture so that, we could look at Splunk and FireEye or whatever in terms of defending against what you're thinking about. So.
Yeah, I mean, we use Okta and we use Azure also. And so, this diagram looks kind of familiar to me. So
yeah, we wanted to make sure that we did this thing as if it was a real application, even though it's a just demo app, right? So, okay.
But great presentation so far.
Yeah, Mahash, you wanna?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So this is the first time I'm joining this meetup, and I really like it, though I missed a couple of slides, and this is the slide 5 where I just joined, and I was listening to the conversations, because at present, for the past 1 year, I'm working on IGA system, and where you talked about now the companies are and all the engineers and all, they are not able to manage the roles because it's like every other day we are creating a new role. It's very true. Now it's become unmanageable. So the company I'm working, I have not seen whether they are going to implement any ABAC because it's attribute based, but to counter that, explosion of roles, they are implementing other tools. They are aggregating the roles. They are using some policies. So they are collaborating it. So they are using some other methods to tackle these role issues.
Yeah, I think the challenge that I saw, I don't have as much experience as Brent, but in the journey that we've been traveling on this, with this ABAC thing, it's very tough for existing software engineers who are used to writing access control directly in their applications and using simple roles but because unless you actually see somebody actually shows you a design like this and show that it actually works, it's actually very hard for people to switch their mind over. So be glad to set up a separate meeting for you and your management or whatever to walk through this design if it helps you. Okay?
Yep, definitely. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And then so Curtis, or I'm not able to see the sailboat name, so.
I hope you can hear me now.
Yeah.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Curtis Nielsen, security architect for 3M Health Information Systems. We have, in our migration to cloud, in our case AWS, we've run into a number of issues where we started out with a little bit of IAM role explosion, and then we went to account explosion, and now we have both IAM role and account explosion. And on top of that, we have recent acquisitions that had their way of doing it and trying to get them to fit together without being in a situation where instead of one nice, well-defined, well-maintained user access control system, we have something like 12. And well-defined, well-maintained doesn't describe any of them. Right. So so I'm interested in the ABAC. We find ourselves in a repeating scenario where you have accounts that have resources that are identified for a particular application team, but the roles don't know that, and the roles don't have any idea that the person that is accessing the resources is on a particular team or not. And we're looking into adding that aspect of it to our existing IAM functions to make sure that we don't have incidents where somebody makes a mistake and now all of a sudden they've just taken down all of the instances of another team across the country.
Right, right.
Because that never happens. Ever.
No, I love the sarcasm.
It never happens for the same person twice.
Yeah. So something on the board in the right hand edge here, Radiant Logic may actually be something that you want to look at. Again, we don't resell any of their products, right? But their claim to fame is, if you will, in this picture, the RadiantOne Federated Identity Service, the way that you described it, 11 different account systems, right? Those are all the different LDAPs or whatever things that below. Their thing is that they allow you to create a virtual directory on the top level and actually point to those other identities, and then you can switch everybody to using the RadiantOne identity service, even though you maintain the LDAP directories for the companies that you've merged in or acquired and so forth. Again, we're not even a consulting company for them, but that's what what we use in this picture is that, right? We have, even though the directories are very small in size, the idea is that we have multiple directories simulating different operating units, right? So the corporate banking, vehicle loan, and mortgage loan are operating units within this fictitious bank. We have separate directories for each one of those, and all the identities from there merge into one Radiant Logic, and then that's shared with Okta for single sign-on. So that may be something that you'd be interested in, aside from the ABAC thing. Okay.
Thank you very much. So far, a very interesting discussion.
Well, great. Thank you. I hate attending these things and I never get anything out of it, right? So I'm glad that you're getting something out of it. So I see name Madison, or anybody else willing to chime in as to who you are and what you're interested in with regards to this.
Hey, Paul. This is Mahesh. I work for a federal agency where my role is basically architecting and designing the identity management and identity governance solutions. So for the agency that I'm working for as a consultant, we are using Okta and Savient for identity governance and administration. But I believe, the ABAC policy, the whole ABAC concept itself is a big lift for government to actually absorb the whole concept, because there are so many silos within the agency. right? So at the end of the day, a lot of buy-in needs to be come from all the business owners. So
yeah,
it's a big, yeah.
Yeah, it's not easy, right? So with this, there's a lot of friction and for multiple reasons, including what you're saying in terms of different business unit, wanting to maintain control over their own thing, right?
Right.
So Savient, just to make sure we just, because you introduced that product, right? So Savient, we don't have on the board.
Right.
Savient is a identity governance and provisioning system, both on-prem and in the cloud. And the difficult thing with Savient is, even as you say, if you have different silos and they all have their own applications, they all have their own identities and roles and so forth, then all of those things actually have to be made known to Savient, so that when you try to provision a new identity, they know which system to go into and know how to provision those identities and access roles and permissions in that. And actually, it's quite a bit of work to make that happen. Is that a true statement?
You're on spot. Yeah, that's the biggest struggle right now. So not many people realized when we went that path. Some big decisions have been made. So, but now, yeah.
Yeah, because Savient sells you, oh, it's so much better to have this one identity governance provisioning thing, but they don't tell you that each one of these lines, let's say each one of these 5 APIs represents a separate application with their own identity and roles and governance models. You have to make Savient work with each one of those and program basically the scripts to create those people in each one of those systems and assign them roles. So that is non-trivial. Each one of these things that we're talking about, right? Identity governance, provisioning, it's a challenge path. There are some systems that are really good for that, but then there are other more legacy systems you have, the harder that is to do that provisioning. And then integration with Okta, if you have it provisioned and so forth, it's relatively easy, but if you're not, it's not easy either. And certainly going down the ABAC road, we can talk about the role explosion, role expansion, and hidden super user roles and so forth that people have access to, that ABAC should be able to solve for you, but getting the application owners and so forth to relinquish that and refactor our applications to use this new way of doing business is also very much non-trivial, with lots and lots of organizational friction, right?
Yeah, totally agree there. Yeah.
So anybody else want to jump in? I think
Hi, this is Dan coughing. I'm apparently the sailboat. I didn't realize my icon was going out.
Okay, Dan.
It's an aspirational icon there. But I'm with Cloud Identity. We're Okta partners as well as Logic partners, and just curious to see how some of this stuff was being implemented. I'm also in the DC area, so seeing some of this ABAC and sort of online, offline identities driven into the government space was an area of just kind of see how that was developing. We come at it from an authorization play, so definitely feel the pain and have heard the pain around the ABAC and the role multiplication and how difficult that gets to be. It sort of harkens back to firewall rules. Who the flip knows what's actually in the pie kind of thing. So we're certainly trying to solve that, not just for the user community, but also for the API to API and microservices and the like. As soon as you move it into other things that blink, not just humans, it gets even more complex. So this is super helpful as an illustration.
Okay, so and because we are in a lab environment, we'd be glad to meet with you separately to talk about your product and how we may be able to swap out a piece on this puzzle, or introduce your piece onto this into this environment, and actually give it a twirl and see if it if it's helpful for you guys, right? Because one of the reasons why we built this lab is actually to help these product companies illustrate, because a lot of times people will say, well, when we do a sales pitch, we only focus on the piece that we have on the board, as opposed to this integrated environment, all the pieces working together. So if you want, we can do that.
I'd like that. And I agree. That's fundamentally the right approach. There's so much integration of the way that identity touches pretty much every single thing in the atmosphere that it's got to be thinking about integrated solutions.
Right. Exactly. So, so nice to meet you, Dan.
Thank you.
Paul, this is Michael. Brent and I had a bit of an interesting discussion via the chat, and I was just wondering if other people had opinions on whether or not it makes use to use a standards-based approach towards authorization.
Okay. Sorry, Michael, can you say that again? My mind was wandering.
Sure. No, I was just saying that Brent and I were talking via chat, and we were kind of talking about, we touched on whether it makes sense to use a standards-based approach when working on an ABAC architecture. And I was just wondering if anyone had experience using Xacamol, if they were using a non-standards-based approach, and what their thoughts were about it.
Yeah, so I don't know, because other than Brent, you and I, and maybe Dan, it didn't sound like anybody else was doing ABAC per se. They're just interested in what we've done, right? So is that a fair statement, everybody? Yeah, so.
Okay.
Yeah, Madison, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Madison. I work as a data analyst at the DOJ, specifically Office of Policy and Legislation. We're pretty small. There's only about like 5 analysts, including me and a bunch of lawyers. And we're really trying to work on how can we expand our like research and analytics capabilities. And I think that would include like looking into cloud services and cloud architecture.
So when you say analytics, are you talking about things like Tableau and those things, or is it some other type of analysis tool?
So it's pretty open. We are starting with like Tableau and those other tools, but it's basically if anyone has any idea of a tool that would be good to use, then they'll look into it. So they're very open. And again, a lot of these are like kind of older lawyers who aren't very familiar with data analytics. So they're really depending on the data analyst to recommend things to look into.
I see. Yeah, NTT Data actually has a footprint, NTT Data Federal System, NDFS, the company that I'm with, actually has contract vehicles with DOJ. And so if you actually wanted to, this is the shameless plug for my company, right? So if you needed to talk more in detail or something like that, there's actually vehicles, but we certainly could have conversations with you with regards to what you're thinking. Because in the lab, what we have done is we've actually built using Tableau integration with ABAC policies, so that the same analytic reports, right? So you built a dashboard using Tableau, but to share that with everybody is not necessarily the right answer, right? Because so if you have the example that we were doing was something like not necessarily foreign military sales, but foreign war games, and so it is sort of military sales, but the idea was that you're doing training with a partner. Well, you don't necessarily want to share everything of the training of the scenario that you're doing in the North Pacific or South China Sea with all of the partners, even though they're participating, but you want them to see their portion of the data. So you've created this big dashboard that's available to that gives you the whole picture, but you want to be able to share that dashboard to the commanding officers for Taiwan or the Philippines or Australia. How would you limit, without having to write new code and their own specific dashboard, how would you do that? So we actually simulated that in the database, and using ABAC policies was able to restrict the SQL queries to those dashboards to only the data that's available to them or that's applicable to them. So there's something to, if you actually went down to that, right? So you could say, you know, oh, we have data analytics only for crim dev or only for white collar crime or whatever, you know, all the different 12 branches or the organizations within DOJ. You could create identities and tags for those things, and then have the dashboards only show up for them, if that helps. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Definitely sounds something my office would be interested in.
Yeah. So if you want to, you know, if you get an opportunity, you know, we certainly be willing to talk to you guys about that. Okay. Great. Nice meeting you, Madison. Anybody else want to chime in? I don't know if there's anybody else left. Okay. So I thought right now this is pretty much what I had planned to go over and help answer any questions. But it's so if you don't have anything else, we could just do a quick wrap up.
Hey, Paul.
Yeah.
Just real quickly, I wanted to recommend that you guys take a look at the chat and throw your LinkedIn profile link in there if you'd like to connect with the people in this group. I think there is a lot of talent and experience on the phone here, and this has been a really great discussion. I would love to connect with those of you that are interested. And I sent you an invite, Paul.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brent. Yeah, I think you know, that's the purpose of this meeting, right? It's not a specific Okta exchange, but I think this is a very broad field, and having like-minded professionals to connect with and bounce ideas off of potentially outside of your organization is really helpful to have that, right? So. Okay, and are we gonna share this the attendees list with everybody, Deepraj or CL?
So Paul, I'm not quite sure about the attendees list. I believe we will be sharing the slides and I think the video recording. So CL does have, he's compiled the contact information for all the attendees here, so he'll be providing that.
Right. So the chat will go away after this meeting ends, right?
It might, yeah. I think I'm gonna have to double check that, but I think the session will be recorded, but I think that may just be video only. So if everyone could kind of gather these links on their own, just in the event that they're not carried over.
Yeah, I think so. That's where I am right now on my screen. But yeah, I think so. So if you want to record these, you should do that before we terminate this meeting. And so Madison, I went to GW too, so nice to meet you from that perspective as well. Okay. Yeah, I think that was a great suggestion, Brent. And I think it's really thrilling to actually find people that have done ABAC, because there's actually not that many, that, as far as I can tell, in the travels that I've been doing. And I'll definitely send you an invite to, I'm getting ready to do a presentation with Axiomatics in November. We will do a little bit more in-depth demo of this portal with the actually changing the attributes in the HR database and changing the policy in the in the DevOps process. I'll send you an invite to that. Hopefully you can join us.
I'd be very interested in seeing that. Right now, we're building an attribute-based access control solution for a federal agency that has a public citizen-facing Azure environment and a private one, and they have very tightly controlled data. And they have these collaboration teams now coming together with people from the outside and the inside. And we're hoping that ABAC will solve the problem of protecting our sensitive, controlled, unclassified information beyond these very layered boundaries.
Yeah, and the roles just can't deal with once you say you're going to open up to the public, and they're going to have they play different roles within the system, whatever. Then all of a sudden, a lot of rules go out the window, right? And role explosion and so forth becomes a huge problem. So.
It becomes easy to accidentally breach a data protection policy.
Exactly. So, and when you start really getting into it, right, it's getting down to the file systems and so forth, share documents, and right. So the example of the Chinese breach in Canada, I believe, if I read that story correctly. So this is at the tail end of the Obama administration. They caught this Chinese professor that was doing consulting work on for a defense contractor, and the Chinese army was able to penetrate the system, saw all the files, and then he actually gave them directions on which files to pull from the system, and that's how they were doing espionage. So that's not necessarily, so it's, in this picture, we're protecting data in the database, but they're actually talking about documents on the file system, right? So the access control policies actually have to go really to be protection, you actually have to go all the way down to there. And the example of, I think it was Snowden or something, he worked out of Hawaii or something, right? And off hours, he was moving large chunks of data around to on his machine. The system caught the fact that he was actually moving large amounts of data, but it wasn't treated as it was a insider threat. From what I understand, the help desk actually called him and says, "Do you actually need more bandwidth?" As opposed to, you shouldn't be doing that, right? So again, those should actually be policies or AI things that says, this is not allowed, this is a bad sign, we should actually flag this as a criminal, potential criminal process thing, right? So, yeah, so the ABAC thing is actually potentially, you can't just be thinking about managing my application and the data, you actually have to be, ultimately the enterprise level, you have to be thinking about that level of defense, in my opinion, because our adversaries, Iran, Russia, China, whoever, they're looking for, as I forget, I think it was Curtis or something that said, you know, he's looking at from the hacker's perspective, how to attack this thing. That's their full-time job, is to attack the infrastructure that we're designing, right? So.
You know, Paul, one thing that has helped us be successful in identity and access management solutions, and ABAC especially, is the concept of test-first development and automated testing. When we have a suite of tests that prove that the right people can access the right data elements and the others cannot, and those can be run as a cron regression test suite, it really helps as that pie becomes more soupy. And there are policies, and you know, those policies may be canceling each other out or conflicting. And there's a science to the growth of identity and access management and ABAC. And having automated tests in place really make it more manageable, so you can make forward progress, knowing that you're not breaking things along the way.
So that's actually a very good point. So are you talking about front door testing at the bank portal level, or are you talking about testing at the policy level down here at the ABAC REST API level?
We're doing mostly the latter. A lot of testing around provisioning and the use cases around granting and approving and receiving access. testing at the data level to make sure that the right people and things in the system are accessing the right data and no others are accessing or have access to that data. And then a little bit of front door testing, but less. But yeah, we really benefit from automated testing. I think there's too much complexity for any one human to hold in their mind all of the potential use cases as we make changes in the system and introduce new policies, connect other systems. It helps to grow in a more risk mitigated environment.
Yeah, and to the way that we have approached this problem, so Axiomatics, I think it's has a capability called, is it the reverse query, Michael, where we built the policy validation tool against?
Yes, it is. Yeah, they have the binary permitter denial, which is the regular one, and the reverse query, which returns a list of resources or users that from based on the policy.
So we, based on their tool or their platform, we built a tool that could answer questions, or you could ask questions like, given Paul Yu, show me which rows of the resource that we're protecting he has rights to. Giving a resource of interest, let's say Donald Trump's tax return, show me who has rights to access that, that document. Those are compliance type of things. And in addition to, these are tools that I think actually should be built and made available in the marketplace. But so along with your automated test scripts and so forth, I think those type of tools actually will be very helpful to help you. I think I totally agree with you. Once the decision tree becomes complex, it should actually become complex rather quickly, especially if it's at the enterprise level where multiple applications are using the same policy set. Then you definitely need tools like what you're talking about, and this compliancy tool that we've built that allows you to look around and exercise the policy tree without having to know everything there is, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. So we're at an hour. Does anybody else have any questions? And again, if you want to copy off these LinkedIn profiles, do so before we terminate, because I don't know what happens when we terminate this meeting with that. Okay. Yeah, I think we actually have an hour and a half, but if you're okay, if you feel like you got enough out of this thing, we can end here. If you want to hang out and talk some more, I'd be glad to do that too.
I wish we were at a cocktail hour where we could talk more at the bar individually, one-on-one. It looks like Michael has actually worked for Axiomatics in a previous life.
Yes, we hired him away from Axiomatics last year, I believe, right, Mike?
Yeah, and I'm now celebrating a little more than a year working with Paul. All good things. Looking forward to another 20, Paul.
Yeah, I'm looking for 10 more years and I could be done. So. Not 20. Anyway, yeah, so, you know, Dan, definitely let's try to follow up. I'll put my email address up from the first slide, right? So it's paul.yu@nttdatafed.com. So if you want to reach out to me directly through my company address, you